Game of Thrones is one of the most densest and most complicated shows on television, and each episode is multi-layered and loaded with meaning. As the show moves towards its epic conclusion, here's a look at some of the most important lines from the final season, and in case it's not already obvious, major spoilers ahead, so please proceed with caution. When Emilia Clarke's Daenerys and Kit Harington's Jon Snow finally arrive at Winterfell, they meet the rest of the Starks and try to convince the Northerners to join their cause. Early on, Jon mutters something important to Daenerys.
Northerners don't much trust outsiders.
Daenerys doesn't exactly impress either of the Stark sisters, especially not Sansa, portrayed by actress Sophie Turner. As you can see by that pronounced side-eye, she clearly doesn't trust this foreign queen, despite Jon's ringing endorsement. This isn't a good sign for Daenerys, but it might not bode particularly well for Jon either. As viewers know, he isn't actually the illegitimate son of Ned Stark at all. He's the son of Lyanna Stark and Daenerys' brother, Rhaegar Targaryen. This fact gives him the biggest claim to the Iron Throne. Once the North discovers Jon's true parentage, it's entirely possible that they'll abandon him. Despite his utter devotion to protecting the North, he's also utterly devoted to the Queen of Dragons. Perhaps they'll see that Jon, who was actually born as Aegon Targaryen, is ultimately an outsider. The reunion between Maisie Williams, Arya Stark, and Jon Snow was a highly anticipated moment. After all, Jon gave Arya her very first sword. Though their time together in the first season was entirely too brief, it was clear that they shared an intense bond. When they meet again at the Godswood at Winterfell, it provides one of the show's biggest and most satisfying emotional moments. It even manages to get a rare smile out of Arya, who was hardened considerably over the course of Game of Thrones. Once the two broach the subject of Sansa and her clear distrust of Daenerys, Arya defends her sister, much to Jon's surprise. Standing her ground, Arya says of her big sister,
"I'm defending our family. So is she."
Of course, she has absolutely no idea that the man standing in front of her isn't part of her immediate family. He's technically a Targaryen, not a Stark. When Jon finally shares the truth of his lineage with Arya and Sansa, Arya immediately agrees to honor his requests and keep the big news a secret. But acting on her distrust of Daenerys, Sansa soon shares the revelation with Tyrion, knowing full well that doing so will most definitely set off a chain of events that could ultimately prove quite problematic for the Mother of Dragons. Fans have been waiting to see what's going on with Jon and Daenerys ever since their first tryst at the end of the 7th season. Well, a scene in the first episode of Season 8 gave viewers a sneak peek into their rather peculiar courtship rituals, which include long romantic dragon rides through the sky. After the two lovebirds finally decide to give their dragons a break, Daenerys spots a nearby cave, saying to Jon with a smirk,
"We could stay 1,000 years. No one would find us."
Well, there's a reason this romantic scene might have felt a little familiar to you. Her comment brings back memories of Rose Leslie's ill-fated character, Ygritte, a wilding that Jon once fell in love with. The doomed couple had their first intimate moment in a cave, and Ygritte also suggested that they stay there forever.
"I don't ever want to leave this cave, Jon Snow. Not ever."
Now that people are starting to learn that Daenerys is actually Jon's aunt, their romantic relationship is probably just as doomed as the one between Ygritte and Jon. Maybe Jon should start listening to his lovers, particularly when they suggest laying low in caves. Bran Stark has been a total weirdo ever since he took up the mantle of the Three-Eyed Raven. He spent the Season 8 premiere lurking all over Winterfell and saying all sorts of cryptic things. One night he has an encounter with Sam Tarley, portrayed by John Bradley. When Sam asks what Bran is up to, he receives this response:
"Waiting for an old friend."
At the end of the episode, Bran's in the courtyard to witness the arrival of Jaime Lannister. The last time Jaime saw Bran, he shoved him out of a high window after Bran caught Jaime and Cersei in a rather compromising position. But the old friend Bran is waiting for turns out to be Theon, who finally makes his way back to Winterfell. Driven by a need to redeem himself, Theon volunteers to lead the team that protects Bran from the Night King during the climactic battle with the White Walkers. Theon ultimately gives his life to try and protect his one-time foster brother, completing his redemption arc and following another line with huge importance.
"You're a good man."
When Jon Snow returns to the North with Daenerys Targaryen in tow, he's met with plenty of disapproval. One of the loudest voices is that of Lyanna Mormont, the diminutive but tough lady of House Mormont. When the northern nobles inside the Hall of Winterfell are confused as to whether they should refer to Jon or Daenerys as Your Grace, Lyanna stands up and tells Jon,
"You left Winterfell a king and came back a... I'm not sure what you are now."
Unbeknownst to Lyanna, that's a rather pointed statement, considering that his true parentage has been revealed to the audience and other characters are about to start learning the news too. Really, he's still Your Grace, except that he's not just the rightful king in the North, he's the king of the Seven Kingdoms. In an effort to bond with Jon's family, Daenerys pays a visit to Sansa during the season's second episode. She asks if the two can speak alone. The Dragon Queen's time at the Stark family home has been fairly fraught thus far, and Sansa has been skeptical of this southern newcomer, frustrated by her relationship with Jon and highly distrustful of her. During their first private meeting, Daenerys seems to charm Sansa quite a bit, telling her that she's traveled all this way because of her love for Jon. She reveals her softer, more vulnerable side to Sansa, and Sansa does seem to warm up, if only for the moment. At one point in their conversation, Sansa says,
"Men do stupid things for women."
She's referring to Jon letting Daenerys take control of the North, but her words could practically be a thesis statement on one of Game of Thrones' underlying themes. From the attempted murder of Bran to Littlefinger's many schemes and Jon's dangerous plan to capture a lone white, so many misfortunes have befallen men as they attempted to impress women. This one sentence succinctly sums up one of the show's central concerns. On the eve of the epic Battle of Winterfell, most of the characters gather up for one final night together. They consider their own mortality, sing, drink, and try to satisfy their every desire, just in case the army of the dead overtakes them before dawn. During a discussion by the fire, Sam Tarly chimes in, saying that the loss of memories is the worst fate of all, and telling his comrades,
That's what death is, isn't it? Forgetting.
Sam tells his friends that they all might die, leaving their names and legacies lost to time. It becomes clear that Sam is determined to keep the memories of his loved ones alive, no matter what happens during the coming battle. This all fits in quite nicely with one of the most popular theories about Sam. Thanks to his education at the Citadel, many people believe the series concludes with him writing the titular Song of Ice and Fire. He might be destined to transcribe all the heroic acts of the people around him so their feats can live on forever. After his speech, it seems even more likely that Sam will be the chronicler of the entire Game of Thrones story. Since he's not a strong fighter or contender for the throne, it seems like historian is the perfect role for him to play as the saga thunders towards its finale. He is hoping he's a faster writer than George R.R. Martin. The Battle of Winterfell takes place at the ancestral home of the Starks, so it's no wonder that the family is front and center. While Sansa is stuck down in the crypts, her sister Arya is out there fighting for her life. Since they reunited in Season 7, the sisters have been working together to hold the North and protect the Stark family. Now that they've reached adulthood, they seem to have arrived at a place of mutual respect and love. This becomes clear when Sansa laments that she can't be altogether helpful during the long night. Perhaps she even feels a bit jealous of her bolder, brasher sister. When Arya gives her sister a dragon glass dagger, she tells her,
Sticking with the pointy end.
Sound familiar? Back in Season 1, Jon gave a small sword to Arya and offered her the exact same instructions.
Sticking with the pointy end.
Perhaps Arya is subtly suggesting to Sansa that she believes they're both equally formidable warriors. Melisandre came out of the woodwork just before the Battle of Winterfell began. She wasted no time showing off, lighting the weapons of every Dothraki warrior on the front lines. A pretty cool flex if you ask us. However, she had plenty more to do during this battle, and it's all tied to Arya Stark. After several horrifying and grueling run-ins with Whites, Arya finds a brief moment of safety alongside the Hound and Melisandre in a locked chamber in Winterfell. For the first time in years, Arya seems just about ready to throw in the towel. Luckily, Melisandre reminds her of a prophecy she made in Season 3 during their first meeting.
I see a darkness in you. And in that darkness, eyes staring back at me.
Brown eyes, green eyes,
And blue eyes.
Melisandre pauses before Blue Eyes to suggest that Arya is the one who will ultimately take down not only the Night King, but all of his blue-eyed brethren. Arya's tryst with Gendry raised plenty of eyebrows, but it was a serious thrill getting to watch Arya pursue the object of her desire, and the night clearly meant a lot to Gendry. After the Battle of Winterfell, Daenerys names Gendry the Lord of Storm's End. Gendry immediately finds Arya and tells her that he loves her, asking for her hand in marriage. Any Game of Thrones fan who's been paying attention to Arya's story knows exactly how this moment will play out. Even though she clearly cares about Gendry, she turns him down immediately.
I'm not a lady. I never have been. That's not me.
This is a subtle callback to a moment she shared in Season 1 with Ned, after her father suggests she might one day become the lady of a great castle.
No. That's not me.
Arya has undergone quite a remarkable transformation throughout the course of the show, but she still knows who she is and who she isn't. Sansa Stark's evolution on Game of Thrones has seen her grow from a whiny preteen to a consummate survivor and shrewd strategist. Characters within the show have noticed her incredible growth just as much as audiences have. During the celebrations at Winterfell in the 4th episode of the 8th season, Sansa reunites with the Hound, who references the abuse she suffered at the hands of her late husband, Ramsay Bolton, a sadistic madman who brutalized her within an inch of her life. Once she tells the Hound how she dispatched Ramsay with hounds, the warrior lets out an impressed chuckle and tells her,
"You've changed, little bird."
He tells Sansa that if she'd left King's Landing under his protection, she never would have had to deal with these horrible men and such awful circumstances. But Sansa has a perfect line of reasoning prepared.
Without Littlefinger and Ramsay and the rest, I would have stayed a little bird all my life.
She makes it perfectly clear that this little bird isn't so little anymore and can fly just as well as anyone or anything. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about Game of Thrones are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.